Time. It governs everything, or so we believe. From the moment we wake to the hour we rest, every action, every plan, every regret is bound by the ticking of the clock. Time is our silent master. But what if the entire concept is flawed? What if time is not a river we travel down, but a construct, a lens, not a law? The moment you realize time isn't real, something inside begins to break open, something old, something human, and through that fracture, truth begins to pour in. In the classical world, time was measured by the sun, by shadows on the wall, by the length of a candle burning. And later, we imposed mechanical rhythms, gears, bells, minutes, hours. These measurements brought order to society, but in doing so, they also separated us from something far more profound, our innate sense of timelessness. Children live in it, artists enter it, mystics speak of it. It's the eternal now. Einstein shattered our understanding with one phrase: the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. And he meant it. The equations of relativity don't care about clocks. The laws of physics are time-symmetric. They don't flow from past to future, they just are. This means there is no absolute now in a universe. Your present moment is yours alone, shaped by your motion, your gravity, your perception. And that's the crack in the system, because if time isn't absolute, then reality isn't either. Everything you've believed about cause and effect, memory and future, aging and decay, it all starts to unravel, not chaotically, but beautifully, like waking up from a long, well-constructed dream. Many ancient traditions understood this long before science caught up. The yogis of India spoke of time as Maya, an illusion to be transcended. The Aboriginal people of Australia speak of dream time, a place where all things exist simultaneously, past, present, future, intertwined. In the words of Alan Watts, the only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. The dance doesn't happen in time, it happens in experience. But how does one begin to live without time? Not as a philosophical idea, but as a daily truth. It starts with noticing how often time controls your decisions. It's too late. I missed my chance. There's not enough time. These are not objective facts. They are internal scripts, inherited and repeated. You are not running out of time. You are running on a story about time. Modern neuroscience reveals that even memory, the backbone of our sense of time, is not as stable as we think. Every time we recall an event, we don't retrieve it, we recreate it. Memory is reconstructed, altered by the present moment, tinted by mood and expectation. The future? Just a projection based on patterned memory. So what's real? Only now, and now, and now. When you drop the idea of time as a linear progression, something magical happens. You begin to notice synchronicities, events that don't follow cause and effect, but meaning. Carl Jung called these meaningful coincidences the language of the psyche. And once you tune in, the whole world begins speaking in it. In the quantum realm, particles entangle and affect each other instantly, regardless of distance. Time doesn't mediate their communication, it's irrelevant. What matters is connection, relationship, resonance. What if your life operates the same way? What if events are not lined up in a row, but woven in a web, humming in frequency with your consciousness? This understanding doesn't mean schedules and clocks disappear, but it shifts your identity. You are not the slave of time. You are its observer, its interpreter, You learn to ride waves of energy, not minutes. You begin to feel when it is the right moment, rather than the scheduled one. The river of now becomes visible, and you step into it. Time stops being a prison and becomes a palette. And with that palette, you begin to paint reality, not according to deadlines, but according to alignment. Creation happens faster when you're not waiting. Healing accelerates when you're not counting. Freedom expands when you're not comparing yourself to where someone else was at your age. The sages were right. Eternity isn't endless time. It's no time at all. Once the illusion of time begins to fall away, a new kind of intelligence awakens, one that doesn't operate on prediction or memory, but on resonance. The question then becomes, if time isn't linear, how do we create? How does change occur? What determines what shows up in our life? The answer is vibration, intention, alignment. You begin to realize that reality doesn't unfold in a straight line. It responds to frequency, and you are the emitter. Thoughts, emotions, and beliefs aren't just private inner experiences. They are the tuning forks of your life. What you hold vibrationally in your being doesn't travel into the future to make things happen. It shapes what you perceive as unfolding. The mechanics of timeless creation are not about manifesting someday. They are about tuning now. Nikola Tesla said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." He didn't say time. He said vibration. Time is how the mind tries to measure what frequency already knows. The mind wants to analyze. The soul wants to resonate. This is why visualizations, affirmations, and meditations are powerful. Not because they change the future, but because they change your current state of being. And your current state of being determines what reality echoes back to you. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And who you are is a collection of frequency patterns, not a linear narrative. As you lean into this understanding, life begins to respond in new ways. Instead of chasing goals that seem far away in the timeline, you ask, what frequency would I be feeling if I already had it? Peace, confidence, joy? You begin to practice those states, not as tricks to get results, but because they feel real now. And as you stabilize them, your outer world starts to conform. This is where things get truly interesting. Time-bound effort begins to dissolve. You realize that the delay between cause and effect isn't because of time, it's because of resistance. Resistance is what keeps a frequency from manifesting. Doubt, disbelief, expectation. These are the frequencies that scramble the signal. But when you act from the timeless now, with presence and clarity, the signal is pure. Life begins to feel lighter. Creativity flows easier. Opportunities that used to take months or years now unfold with surprising speed. People call it synchronicity, but it's just coherence. This is also why deep meditation and flow states are so transformative. In those moments, time disappears. You stop rehearsing the past and stop projecting the future. You become fully available to the present field, and in that presence, life reorganizes. Is it still okay to set goals? Of course, but goals are now intentions, not destinations. They are vibrations you tune to, not tasks you chase. Instead of planning your life in months or years, you start to ask, what is aligned now? What is true now? This kind of living requires trust, because letting go of time means letting go of control. But that's where the real magic happens. Life stops being a race and becomes a rhythm. Relationships deepen. Insight comes faster, healing accelerates, because now you're not forcing, you're allowing. Timeless creation is not about escaping the material world. It's about mastering your interface with it. It's about understanding that while clocks keep ticking, they no longer hold your power. You create not by pushing harder or waiting longer, but by becoming more coherent. Every spiritual master throughout history has pointed to this. The power is here now. Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you." Buddha spoke of the present moment as the gateway to liberation. Rumi wrote, "You were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life?" None of these teachings hinge on future events. They are calls to presence. The mechanics of timeless creation require no permission, no schedule, only awareness, only willingness. So begin to notice what state you are in, not just what you are doing. Begin to practice feeling what you would feel if you weren't measuring your worth by time. Begin to see the spaces in between moments, because in those spaces, eternity lives. Living beyond the clock doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means reinterpreting it. It means no longer allowing your sense of worth, purpose, or possibility to be dictated by hours, days, deadlines, or your age. There is a belief that says you're too late or you missed your window. But that belief only exists if you believe in time as a fixed ruler, and if time isn't real, if it's a relative, mind-made concept, then neither is being too late nor too early. There is only aligned or misaligned. Let's be clear, our culture is obsessed with time. We glorify hustle, grind, milestones. By 30, you should have this. By 40, you better have that. And if you don't, you feel like you're failing. But this obsession with external timing makes people rush into things they're not ready for and abandon dreams that were simply not ripe yet. This is the sickness of linear thinking. But what if, instead, your soul was on a spiral timeline, one that curved and folded with purpose, one that didn't move faster or slower, but deeper? What if your journey didn't need to make sense to anyone else's clock? Einstein said, "The distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Even physics admits it. The clock is not the law, it's a tool. And tools are only useful when you understand their purpose. You don't have to beat the clock. You're not here to win time. You're here to wake up inside of it, to realize that you are the author of your rhythm. When you stop living by the clock, your energy changes. You stop rushing conversations. You stop overbooking yourself to feel productive. You stop panicking when plans shift. You begin to trust flow. You begin to listen to when something wants to move and when it wants to wait. In this space, intuition becomes louder than the ticking of the watch. You start to notice things you once missed, signals, emotions, instincts. You begin to feel what's right without needing it to be scheduled. This is what happens when you live timelessly. Peace replaces urgency. Joy replaces judgment. Presence replaces pressure. And ironically, you often accomplish more. Because now you're not dividing your energy across past regrets and future fears. You're fully engaged. Living beyond the clock also means rethinking aging. The narrative we've been fed is that youth equals power and aging equals decline. But that idea is rooted in a linear, decaying view of time. Look deeper, and you see that some of the most radiant, impactful, wise beings don't peak in their 20s. They expand with time, not degrade with it. Time, when not clung to, becomes an ally. It matures your perception. It seasons your presence. It adds depth to your gifts. But only when you stop measuring your worth by how long something takes. If you've ever said, "It's too late for me," pause. Who told you that? And why did you believe them? If time isn't real in the way we've been taught, then you are always on time, as long as you're in alignment. This doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean passivity. It means moving when movement calls. It means trusting that your rhythm is sacred. It means listening to the silence between the minutes and the stories that don't need clocks. When you detach from the illusion of time, you reclaim your power to decide what matters, what moves, and what heals. You are not here to fit someone else's timeline. You are here to co-create reality from presence. If time isn't real, then presence is everything, and that presence, the eternal now, is not a place you visit. It's your original home. The ancient mystics called it awareness. Philosophers called it consciousness. Today, it's called being in the moment. But words aside, presence is what remains when the mind stops dragging you into past regrets and future fears. Most people don't live in the now. They live in memory or anticipation. They replay old conversations. They imagine future arguments. They try to rehearse life instead of living it. But presence doesn't happen in planning. It happens in surrender. Think about this. The present is the only time you ever actually experience. The past is a memory, an echo of what was. The future is an idea shaped by your current mind. So, when are you actually alive? Only now, right now. And here's the twist. Everything that ever happened and everything that will happen unfolds inside the present. Time is how we measure change, but change only ever happens in the now. If you've ever lost track of time while doing something you love, you've touched this state. Hours pass, but you're unaware. You weren't in time. You were in being. This is the flow state athletes and artists talk about. But it's not limited to special moments. It's always available. The present moment never hides from you. You just forget to meet it. Memory is tricky. We treat the past like a fixed story. But neuroscience shows that every time you remember something, you're not recalling a file. You're recreating it. Your current mood, beliefs, and bias color every memory you access. In that sense, the past isn't behind you. It's being rewritten by your now. And what about the future? The same mechanism applies. You don't see the future clearly, you project it based on your present. If you're scared now, you imagine a scary future. If you feel empowered now, your future seems open. So again, everything flows from now. The great minds understood this. Eckhart Tolle wrote, "Realize deeply that the present moment is all you have. Make the now the primary focus of your life." Nikola Tesla, too, often spoke about how ideas came to him in moments of silent receptivity, not from future prediction, but from tapping the stillness within. When you align with the now, you stop being at war with time. You no longer fear running out of time because you realize time isn't running. You are. The clock is a tool, but your presence is the architect. This shift changes how you relate to people too. Most people don't listen. They wait to respond. They're trapped in inner commentary. But when you're truly present with someone, time dissolves. They feel seen, understood, healed. That's the power of attention, real attention. It stops time. In presence, you don't need everything figured out. You're not worried about 10 steps ahead. You just feel the next step. You trust it. And that trust builds a path beneath your feet as you walk. The illusion of time also makes people believe healing takes years, but healing often happens in a single moment, when something inside you shifts, when a story finally drops, when you return to presence and stop identifying with the pain of a past that doesn't even exist anymore. This is the eternal now, not a poetic concept, a reality. And when you live here, life begins to organize itself around your stillness, not your struggle, not your stress, but the presence you bring to each moment. The moment you fully embody now, you stop being a slave to the when. You stop needing things to happen by a certain date to feel successful. You stop needing apologies to release the past. You stop needing guarantees to step into the future. Because when you're grounded in presence, nothing is missing. Presence is the portal to all possibilities. The eternal now doesn't just hold peace, it holds power. Real creation starts here, real wisdom flows here, real life happens here. Everything else is noise. If time isn't real, then death isn't what we think it is either. The fear of death is, at its core, the fear of running out of time. We picture a timeline with a beginning, middle, and end, birth to death. But if that timeline is just a construct of our perception, what happens to death when the structure collapses? It too becomes something different, something less final, less terrifying, maybe even liberating. Let's step back. Most people live as if life is a countdown. The years, the deadlines, the goals, everything is structured by a clock. We measure progress by birthdays, seasons, and anniversaries. But when you truly grasp that time is a lens, not a law, you begin to ask, what am I rushing toward? What am I rushing away from? If the soul is not bound by time, then neither is your consciousness. This isn't a new idea. It's ancient. Across cultures and centuries, spiritual traditions have spoken of the soul as an eternal presence, not tied to a single body or moment. The philosopher Plotinus believed that the soul existed before the body and would exist after it. Nikola Tesla said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence." What happens when you stop seeing death as the end of the story and instead see it as a shift in perspective? If life is a dream through the lens of time, death may simply be waking up from that dream into another layer of reality. Think about near-death experiences. Across thousands of accounts, people describe something strangely consistent. Time slows or vanishes entirely. They experience life reviews, but not like watching a video. It's instantaneous, all at once. They feel everything, not sequentially, but as a single burst of knowing. That's not time. That's presence. That's awareness beyond time. This is where the idea of timelessness comes in. When you're no longer obsessed with past and future, something extraordinary happens. You start to remember who you really are, not the body, not the job, not the list of accomplishments, but the awareness that's been quietly observing your whole life from the background. And that awareness, it didn't start when you were born. It doesn't stop when your body dies. It exists outside of time, which means death isn't a wall. It's a doorway. The idea that the soul continues after physical death isn't just philosophy, it's supported by real science. Dr. Ian Stevenson spent decades documenting cases of children who remembered past lives with verifiable details. His work at the University of Virginia includes thousands of case studies that challenge the mainstream narrative of one life, one timeline. If time isn't real, then reincarnation isn't just a possibility. It's a natural continuation. You're not a timeline with a consciousness. Your consciousness playing with the idea of a timeline. Here's what changes when you internalize this. You stop fearing death, not because you want it, but because you realize it's not the end. You stop wasting time, not because the clock is ticking, but because every moment matters equally. You start making decisions from a deeper place, not from panic or pressure, but from clarity. You stop putting off your life. You stop saying one day, because now you know there is no one day. There's only this day. Even grief begins to transform. When you lose someone, time tells you they're gone. But presence tells you something else. It tells you they've simply changed form. Their consciousness has shifted, not vanished. You can still feel them, not in memory, but in the quiet, sacred space of the now. This is why people say, I felt their presence, because presence is where they still exist. Now let's go one level deeper. If time isn't real, then the past you regret and the future you fear don't exist. They only exist through your thoughts. Your suffering comes not from the events, but from replaying and rehearsing them. Release that, and you step into a freedom beyond understanding. This is why masters from every tradition taught silence, stillness, and breath, not as escape, but as return. Return to the eternal now, the place beyond clocks, the space where eternity isn't endless time, it's no time. Timelessness doesn't mean nothing happens. It means what happens isn't measured, it's lived. And from this space you start to access a higher intelligence. Call it divine mind, universal consciousness, God, whatever word fits. But the moment you stop measuring your life by time, you start receiving guidance that doesn't come from your mind. It comes from beyond it. Synchronicity becomes normal. Intuition gets louder. Things fall into place, not because you planned them, but because you're finally aligned. When you live without clinging to time, you trust. You surrender, not in defeat, but in wisdom. You realize there's a deeper rhythm, not chaos, not randomness, but a deeper pulse that was always there, beneath the ticking of the clock. And that's the final piece. The eternal now isn't just a mindset, it's your natural state. Time is a costume your soul wears for a little while, but when you take it off, what remains is truth. And truth doesn't age, it doesn't fear, it doesn't die. It simply is. And once you realize this, everything changes. We grow up believing we are a fixed someone, a name, a personality, a story tied neatly to a beginning, a middle, and an end. You're born on a certain date. You grow, you go to school, you become someone. You fail, you succeed, you carry shame and pride like badges. You age, you die. But what if this entire framework, this self, is only real inside the illusion of time? Strip time away, and what happens to the story? Think about it. Identity relies on memory, on a personal history. It's a narrative of cause and effect. I am this way because that happened. But in a timeless reality, there's no past to pin that story to. No because. Only now. Your identity begins to fray when you deeply realize that time is a mental overlay, a filtering lens, not a fundamental structure. Who are you, really, outside of your memory, outside of your plans, outside of the roles you play, the wounds you carry, the titles you wear? The mind scrambles to hold on. It wants labels, reference points. But in the timeless space, in raw awareness, there's nothing to cling to. Just this, just presence. This realization is both terrifying and liberating. Pause for a second and think about how you usually describe yourself. I'm someone who always, or I'm the kind of person who never, or I used to be. These are all time-anchored identities. They're rooted in sequence, I used to struggle, then I changed, or this happened to me when I was young, and now I'm like this. Trauma, success, habits, fears, they're all glued together by the idea of past and future. But when you realize time is not objectively real, just a structure we use to interpret experiences, the glue starts to dissolve. If there's no real past, then your entire narrative becomes unstable. That can feel like ego death, like falling through the floor. Because what's left? Awareness, pure presence. You are still here, but not as a timeline, not as a story, not as a concept. Just presence, just the experience of being. Here's where most people panic. They think, if I'm not my past, then who am I? But look at this through a new lens. The moment you stop identifying as a story, you become free. Free to respond rather than repeat. Free to act without dragging a past into the present. Free to explore new energy without defending an old identity. That doesn't mean your memories vanish. They're still accessible like files on a drive. But they're no longer you. They're no longer personal. They're part of an experience, but not your definition. This is what mystics mean when they say, die before you die. Let the time-bound identity dissolve. Let it collapse. What remains is truth, not personality, not opinion, just truth. Nikola Tesla once said, the day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. Tesla didn't speak from theory. He tapped into something beyond linear logic. He knew the real breakthroughs came from consciousness, unchained from time. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, also wrestled with this. He spoke of the self as something deeper than ego, something that exists outside the personal timeline. He called it the collective unconscious. But it's more than that. It's a timeless field of awareness that you return to when the noise of identity falls away. So if your self isn't a fixed point in time, then it's fluid. It's participatory. It's quantum. If you carry your past like a script, you'll unconsciously recreate the same loops in relationships, finances, habits. The future becomes a slightly edited copy of the past. It's not really new. It's a remix. But when you cut the past loose, not by denying it, but by no longer identifying with it, something strange happens. The future becomes unwritten. It opens. You stop operating on autopilot. You stop expecting the same pain, the same limitations, the same lack. Time loosens. Possibility returns. You can finally step into what feels like real choice. This is what happens when time collapses in your perception. It's not about becoming passive or indifferent. It's about becoming unbound. The spiritual trap is thinking the goal is to build a better version of me, a better persona, a more impressive timeline. But the deeper path has always been the opposite, to become no one, not in a nihilistic way, but in a spacious, alive way, to see clearly that identity is just clothing, that behind all of it, all the wins, the wounds, the progress, there is an unchanging presence. That's what you are. Timeless. Not because you ignore time, but because you've seen through it. You've seen that it's useful for navigation, for storytelling, but not you. You've stopped confusing the map for the terrain. This is where real peace begins. Let's be clear. This isn't about giving up on life. You'll still work, plan, love, create, but you'll do it from a different state, a state that isn't constantly seeking validation through time, a state that isn't defending an identity. You'll make decisions without dragging the past into every choice. You'll stop trying to predict the future based on old wounds. You'll simply respond cleanly, clearly, as life flows. And in that, you become powerful, not in a loud, forceful way, but in a way that moves with the universe, not against it. The self that exists only within time is a ghost, a shadow. It flickers with memory, doubt, hope. It changes with every moment, yet tries to convince you it's permanent. But when you realize that time is not the structure of your being, only a filter through which you've been trained to perceive, everything changes. The person you thought you were, that was a reflection. Now you've turned to look at the light source. And the moment you do that, the whole illusion starts to fall away.